I think this one is a little better. How's everybody doing this morning? You know, church, the book of Isaiah is the first book. It's the first of the book of the written prophets in the Bible. In the beginning of Isaiah's ministry, he was liked. But like most prophets, he soon became unpopular. Unpopular because his message was so difficult to hear. He called for people to turn from their lives of sin and warned of God's judgment and God's punishment. Instead of reading all of chapter 42, I will read the key verses pertaining to the subject today. Isaiah 42, 1 through 3, 6 through 9, 14 through 21. Isaiah 42, 1 through 3. Behold, my servant whom I uphold, my elect one in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the Gentiles. He will not cry out nor raise his voice, nor cause his voice to be heard in the street. A bruised reed he will not break, and smoking flat he will not quench. He will bring forth justice and truth. Verse 6. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness, and will hold your hand. I will keep you and give you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the Gentiles, to open blind eyes, to bring out prisoners from the prison, those who sit in darkness from the prison house. I am the Lord, that is my name, and my glory I will not give to another, nor my praises to carved images. Behold, the former things have come past, and the new things I declare. Before they spring forth, I tell you of them. Verse 14. I have held my peace for a long time. I have been still and restrained myself. Now I will cry like a woman in labor. I will paint and gasp at once. I will lay waste the mountains and hills, and dry up all their vegetation. I will make the rivers coastland, and I will dry up the pools. I will bring the blind by a way they do not know. I will lead them in paths they have not known. I will make darkness light before them, and crooked places straight. These things I will do for them, and not forsake them. They shall be turned back. They shall be greatly ashamed, who trust in carved images, who say to the molded images, you are our God. Hear you deaf, and look you blind, that you may see. Who is blind but my servant, or deaf as my messenger whom I send? Who is blind as he who is perfect, and blind as the Lord's servant, seeing many things, but you do not observe, opening ears, but he does not hear. The Lord is well pleased by his righteous sake. He will exalt the law and make it honorable. The subject today is blind as a bat, and your ears need cleaning out.
All right.
Being as blind as a bat, and maybe your ears need cleaning out. The story of an elderly woman that stood on a busy street corner. She was hesitant, church, to cross because there was no traffic sign. None. As she waited, a gentleman came up beside her and asked, may I cross over with you? She was relieved. She thanked him and took his arm. but the path they took was anything but safe. The man seemed to be confused as they dodged the traffic, trying to get across the street. They walked in a zigzag pattern across the street. Now once they got over, the woman said, "You almost killed us." The woman shouted in anger. When they finally reached the curb, the woman said, "You walk like you're blind." The man said, "I am." He replied, "That's why I asked you if I could cross with you." You know, we've heard the expression of, "You're as blind as a bat." The expression used is based on the idea that because bats fly erratically, they are blind. In fact, they are not blind at all. However, this message is not about bats. It's about blindness. You see, we live in a world where some people's eyes have been blind. They truly have. Like the man and the woman crossing the street. They can't see where they're going and they're headed for certain destruction. Not only are they blind, but they are deaf as well. Sometimes when we witness to others on how truly great God is and talk to them about their spiritual condition, it feels like we are wasting our time, don't it? In many cases, we feel like we are talking to brick walls. Why? Because they are too deaf to hear. Some of you may know the story of Helen Keller. The story of Helen Keller. Helen was both blind and deaf. On top of that, she was a little brat. She would often smash dishes and lamps and terrorize the whole household with her screaming and temper tantrums. She would eat the food off other people's plates at the dinner table. Relatives regarded her as a monster and thought that she should be put away in an institution. That's where she really should go. But really, what would you do if you were one of her family members? Would you yell at her? You know, pure logic would seem obvious that it won't do any good to yell at someone who can't hear. But how often do we try? How often do you yell at that lawnmower when it doesn't start? Or that weed eater who you done pulled that string 9 times and it haven't started? How often when you talk to someone who doesn't understand English, you know, the tendency is to talk louder. Maybe that would help them understand you. You know, I have a little problem that I have to deal with myself. You know, church, just like all of you, my ears don't clean themselves out as they should. So when we don't clean out our ears, some of us may get a wax buildup and we can't hear well. I remember many times as a boy growing up in Tennessee, my mother would get after me and tell me, you know, you need to clean out your ears. As a boy, I may have just been pretending not to hear so I wouldn't have to do what she told me to do. And you know, imagine going to a doctor and telling him, you know, doctor, I'm losing my eyesight. And to have that doctor tell you, come on, look, don't be blind. It seems rather foolish to tell a blind person to see or a deaf person to hear, doesn't it? But the same thing happens today as Isaiah calls out in verse 18. Hear ye deaf and look ye blind, that ye may see. This morning I'd like to talk to you for a little while about spiritual blindness. First, the reality of spiritual blindness. Second, the reason for spiritual blindness. And third, the result of spiritual blindness. And fourth, there's a rescue from that spiritual blindness. There is. You notice in verse 6 and 7, the Lord, it reads, I, the Lord, have called thee in righteousness, and I will hold thy hand and will keep thee, and give thee for a covenant of the people, for a light of the Gentiles, to open the blind eyes, to bring out the prisoners from the prison, and them that sit in darkness out of the prison house. Church, it will not take us long to look out into this world that we live in today, the world around us, before we realize that we are in fact living in a world where sin has blinded some people's eyes. It has. Every day that we read or hear about another murder, another rape, another horrendous crime. There was a story Story about Sherlock Holmes. You know Sherlock Holmes, the great detective, and his partner, Dr. Watson. They went on a camping trip together. After a good meal, they laid down for the night and they went to sleep. Hours later, Holmes woke. Holmes awoke and nudged his faithful friend. He said, "Watson, look up and tell me what you see." Watson replied, looking up, "I see millions and millions of stars." "What does that tell you?" Watson pondered for a minute. "Astronomically, it tells me that there are millions of galaxies and potential billions of planets. Astrologically, I observe that Saturn is in Leo. Horologically, I seduce that the time is approximately 3:15. Theologically, I can see that God is all powerful. And that we are small and insignificant. Meteorologically, I suggest that we will have a beautiful day tomorrow." "Why? What does that tell you?" Holmes replied. Watson replied, "Holmes, you idiot, someone stole our teeth." Some of us here this morning have allowed our eyes to be blinded. We really have. Blinded to the reality of sin in our own lives. Verse 20. "Seeing many things, but thou observest not. Opening the ears, but heareth not." So, are we aware of the spiritual blindness around this church? Are we really? What about ourselves? Have we been blinded by sin? Next, I want us to notice the result of spiritual blindness. Now, the result of spiritual blindness is, of course, sin. That's it. Sin darkens the eyes of those who are involved. They begin to no longer realize their own awful condition. 2 Corinthians 4:4 tells us Satan, who is the god of the world, has blinded the minds of those who don't believe. They are unable to see the glorious light of the good news. They don't understand this message about the glory of Christ. Blind and deaf. That's the way God describes the Israelite in today's text. Just as there are different degrees of physical blindness and deafness, God says the same thing about being spiritually blind. Isaiah was in fact saying, nobody is as blind and deaf as the Israelites. And what made them so blind and deaf? Have you seen many things, but you paid no attention? They saw many things, but paid no attention. Their ears was not open. You hear nothing. It wasn't the fact that the Israelites couldn't hear, but they didn't want to hear, and they didn't want to see. My wife sometimes tells me, she used to tell me a long time ago, because when she tells me to do something, I ask me to do something, I would say, "What did you say?" And she said, "Your ears, you must have a hearing problem. You need to go to the doctor and see. You may need a hearing aid." So I actually went to the doctor. My doctor referred me to the Baptist hospital, and I went up there and they had me in. They finally got me in a room, a noise room, the box, and they had me sitting there with these two things. Now, when you hear something over here, you press this. And when you hear something over there, you press that. So I sat in there for like 20 minutes. Just, the beep, beep, beep. Pressing. When I came out, I said, I wonder, am I going to get hearing aid? The doctor said, "Mr. Sawyer, sit down. We find nothing. Your ears are perfect." I said, "Well, my wife, she complained." He said, "Mr. Sawyer, that's selective hearing." There was nothing wrong with the physical eyes and ears of the Israelites. There was nothing wrong with it. Their bodies was working as God had created them to function. But their eyes and ears of their soul had ceased to hear and see. They had chosen to trust in idols instead of the Lord, because they didn't love God above all things, and they didn't want to listen to Him. What a shame it was for the very people of God, who had been given so many spiritual advantages, church, to see His wonders, to hear His word, choose to close their eyes to His will. and stop up their ears to his commands. What caused this disease to affect God's people? All the other nations was worshiping gods made of gold and silver. Perhaps that contributed to their lack of sight and hearing in their relationship with the true God. Now, we could also point to the enticing sin that the Israelites saw going on among their neighbors. You know, the spiritual leaders in Israel was also partly to blame. They was. Blamed for the blindness and deafness of God's people. But ultimately, the responsibility must fall on each and every individual, the same as us. And every one of the Israelites who let their eyes and ears stop functioning. And that goes for us too, truly. It truly does. They chose to put their trust in other gods and let their loyalty be distracted from the one true God. They had allowed their hearts and minds to wander from God's word. And finally, like a sick patient in denial over their disease, the people who heard Isaiah's prophecy chose to deny the results of their hearing and seeing test. In their pride, they refused to acknowledge what they had become. They refused to hear the truth about the condition of their relationship with God. Church, we have seen the reality and the reasons for Israelite spiritual blindness, and next, the result of spiritual blindness. You know, on March 14, 2002, a fog triggered a massive freeway pileup along Interstate 75 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. About 125 vehicles, including 20 tractor trailers, smashed into each other in thick fog. They cut visibility down to one car on Interstate 75 south of Chattanooga. Now, it was on a Thursday morning, killing at least 4 people, injuring at least 39, and backing up traffic for miles in both directions. At least 4 people died and dozens were injured. And the reason why that stuck with me, I usually take that route going to my home in Knoxville, Tennessee. But this day, drivers was unable to see their way. Dozens of motorists drove blindlessly ahead into disaster. But many people today are blindly headed for that same disaster, right? However, like a good doctor who sees a patient on a self-destructive course, the Lord wasn't going to be put off easily. He was going to impress on his people how serious their condition was now, and that they needed a cure that only he could offer. He spoke through Isaiah in verse 14 and 15. For a long time I have kept silent. I have been quiet and held myself back. But now, like a woman in childbirth, I cry out, gasp and pain. I will lay waste the mountains and hills and dry up all vegetation. I will turn rivers into islands and dry up the pools. Church, God's patience with his people had come to an end. He was going to raise his voice now so that they would listen. He was going to do some things that would get the attention of his people. Then maybe they would accept his cure for their eyes and their ears. We know how the rest of the story ended. In Isaiah 42:25, it reads, Therefore he poured out his fury on them and destroyed them in battle. They were enveloped in flames, but they still refused to understand. They were consumed by fire, but they did not learn their lesson. For centuries, God's people was content to remain in their blind and deaf condition. And even when God came to them in a literary voice in a fully human body, they covered their ears to what he did and they covered their eyes to what he did and plugged their ears to what he had to say. Jesus, the great physician of the body and soul, pronounced his judgment on them as he quoted Isaiah. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, Hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and not perceive. For the hearts of this people have grown dull. Their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them. And that's in Matthew 13 through 15. Church, the end result of spiritual blindness is just this, is eternity in hell. You know, that's the end result. However, I want us to know that there is a rescue from that spiritual blindness. There is. If you read verse 1 through 3, 6 through 7, and 21, there is one who does not want us to die in our blindness. He doesn't. He does not want you to die in your sin. And he wants you to take part in the plan of salvation that he has provided. In verse 1 to 3 and verse 6, 7, they was all verses of prophecy looking forward to when God will send his son, Jesus, to deliver us from our sin. He has made a covenant and has become the light for the Gentiles. And guess what? The Gentiles are us. He doesn't want us to sit in darkness anymore, church, but he wants to deliver us out of that prison house. Have you been rescued? Have you? Or are you ready for God to check your eyes and ears out?
All right.
Or are you blind as a bat and your ears need to be cleaned out? Do some of the same system affect us as the ones that affected God's people in Israel time?
Yes, sir.
Are God's words going in one ear and going out the other? Like they did for God's people in the Old Testament? Do we look at our bank account instead of the Lord for security? Do we bow down to metal idols with four wheels and shiny coats of paint? Has a home in a subdivision the few steps down from the one in which we live became a temple where we really want to worship? Are those the gods we are working for, church? We may not have a pagan neighbor worshiping God through sex with prostitutes like the Israelites encountered, but immorality and perversity are a way of life for so many in our country today.
Yes, sir.
We are worshiping like them and accepting their ways, aren't we? Though what we watch, through what we watch and read and by the thoughts that we have we allowed anything into our life which God prohibited? If so, is that sin? Now, in conclusion, church, God wants a relationship with us. He truly wants a relationship with us. And there is no relationship that can be what it is intended to be without communication. God may not peel back the sky and scream answers to you, but he will through the reading of the Bible and through the direction that he reveals in our lives, in our prayer life. If we really take the time to listen, the Israelites was blinded and deaf due to their sin. How about us? Are we as blind as a bat, and do our ears really need to be cleaned out? Exodus 16:7-8. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your complaints against the Lord. Luke 8:18. Therefore consider carefully how you listen. Isaiah 35:12. It shall blossom abundantly to rejoice, even with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given to it, the excellence of Carmel and Sharon. They shall see the glory of the Lord, the excellence of our God. Luke 9:35. A voice came from a cloud saying, "This is my son, who I have chosen. Listen to him." John 10:27. My sheep listen to my voice, and I know them, and they follow me.
All right.
Church, Christ died to save us from our sins. We cannot save ourselves. He is willing to save all who turn to him. And salvation is from God alone. To God be the glory. The doors of the church are now open.